We've talked about the user experience process and some of the different roles. I'd like to just summarize this with talking about some of the skills and knowledge that you need on your user experience team. Now, if you're a user experience team of one, then you kind of need to have all these skills and knowledge. If you have many people, maybe you can parse this out amongst them. But here's what user experience professionals need to be able to know how to do in order to do their job effectively. So you need people who are good at interviewing for the user research part. So they can conduct interviews with stakeholders and they can conduct interviews with the target audience users. So they need to know about how to interview, what kinds of questions to ask, how to collect data. You need the skills of design. You need high-level design skills, how to do information architecture, and there's different ways to test information architecture like card sorts. So you need someone who knows about designing and testing and a high-level design. You need to have skills about detail design. Some of those might be visual design skills, such as color and layout, and also then detailed interface design skills like the flow of a task. Someone who knows how to design a form so that it's easy to use. So we have that detailed designs. They need to know about storyboarding and sketching and prototyping, about collaborating with others while they're doing these tasks. You need to have people who know about user testing. What is a user test? How do you conduct one? How do you recruit users? And I think it's important to understand about behavioral science. Now, I'm throwing that in there, and not everyone would necessarily agree with me, but I believe if you're trying to design a great user experience, you need to understand about people, about how they think and how they learn, how much information they can handle all at once. So I think they need some basic understanding about behavioral science, especially if you want them to design an engaging user experience. So these are examples of the types of skills and knowledge that your team is going to need. Whether you are a product designer or whether you are a user experience person or the director, manager of a user experience team, I want to talk a little bit about the obstacles you are likely to encounter as you do UX inside of an organization. And if you've been doing this for a while, some of these are going to sound really familiar. If you're new to it, you might not know that these obstacles are coming up. So just know that these are really typical things that happen when you are doing UX or when you're trying to design user experiences on products. So the first one I want to talk about, obstacles to success. People may not understand or get what user experience is all about. They think it means, they may never have even thought of it, or if they've thought of it, they think it means that, at the end, we'll have somebody do some user testing. Or when we're all done, we'll have somebody make it pretty and change the colors. So they don't understand the goals. They don't understand anything about a process. And what happens then, because they don't understand it, is they don't bring in the user experience design person early enough. They don't build in time into the project to do any user experience work. They don't put any money in the budget for a user experience person to be involved because they just don't understand it. So that's one thing, is a lot of people don't really understand what UX is all about and what it means to do UX. Another obstacle similarly is that they may not understand it, or they may understand it, but they don't really think it's a good idea, or it's just not that important. It's not worth the time. It's not worth the money. we're just, it's not worth the fact that we have to go back and change things. They just don't want to do it. So that's another problem you might have, is that the people that are working on the project might not support the work. All kinds of reasons for this. They might not want to change what they've already designed. They might not like your ideas. They might be threatened. I had a situation once where I was the user experience designer on a project, and there was a programmer there who was obviously being very hostile to any of my ideas and suggestions. And finally, at one point, I literally took him out into the hallway and I said, "What's going on? Why are you so, against any of these ideas for design?" And what came out is that he wanted to do the design. He said, "Hey, the coding, that's the boring part. The design is the fun part, and you're taking away the fun part of my job." So you never know why it is that someone might be resisting what you're trying to do, but it does happen. So they don't understand, they don't support. What other possible obstacles are there to doing UX work? Well, here's another one. You might be a UX team of one, or in general, there just might not be enough resources. So perhaps they do understand and they do support, and everybody wants you. Everyone wants you to work on their project, and you're the only person. And so you'd like to, do a really thorough job and do a good job, but you're being pulled in too many directions. Or you might not be a UX team of one. You might have 5 people, but still there's enough work for 25 people if it's a big company that you work for. So it's often true that somebody, if not you, then perhaps it's the manager of the group, has to decide which types of UX work are going to happen on which projects. And some projects maybe don't get any. Some projects might get a lot. Some projects might get just a little bit of testing. And so there has to be a decision about which projects are most likely to benefit the most. But that's a possible obstacle, that there's just not enough resources for the work that really needs to get done. And in addition to not having enough resources, you might not have the right type of resource. So maybe, all you have available to you are very junior people, and they're not very senior, and they don't have a lot of experience, and they're great, but, you need someone to mentor them. It's sometimes hard to get, senior level people. So it might not just be that there aren't enough resources, but it's not the right type. Maybe you don't have somebody good at visual design. Maybe you don't have someone good at experienced at doing interviews. Maybe you don't have someone who's really good at prototyping the detailed part of the design. So it's important to try and get the right resources, but you may not always be able to do that. Another possible obstacle is not having enough high-level support in your organization. So I see this a lot where there's sometime at some point, somebody set up a couple people to be the UX team, and they're doing great work. But they have no one, they had a manager at one point, and they were in this department over here. And then that person left, and no one really replaced them. And they ended up, the whole group got put under this manager over here who really doesn't understand what they do or doesn't care that much what they do. And so they don't have someone to go to bat for them. They don't have someone to help them through, any of the organizational hurdles that are in any organization. And so they end up, just doing user testing, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with user testing, but they're not able to do some of the design work or some of the important research they need to do because they don't have an advocate at a high enough level. So if you don't have someone who supports what you do and can go to bat for your team at a higher level in the organization, that you need to find someone who will. That you'll find that that's really important, and without that, it'll be an obstacle to your success. You've got to realize if you're doing UX in an organization, you're going to have to be constantly teaching and evangelizing. And marketing. I've had some people that say, I can't, I get so tired of saying the same things over and over. Well, I think that's the role. People come, people go, people are doing other jobs like, they're responsible for marketing or sales or programming or whatever it is, and UX is not their thing. And then a new person comes in, and you've always got to be teaching, marketing what your group is doing, presenting what they're doing. You are the evangelist for UX, or someone in your team needs to be. And I think it just comes with the role. That can be an obstacle if you don't have anyone who's good at that or anyone who wants to do that, because it can mean that all of a sudden there's a new manager in who's in charge of your group, and you don't have things ready to show them about how important your work has been. So don't neglect that part of what you're doing. And one last obstacle that I'll talk about, it has to do with how people are incentivized and rewarded in the organization. I remember I was sitting in one meeting at one point with a client, and I was meeting with a fairly high-level vice president, and he said, and we had, we were talking about UX in the organization and how they could grow it and so on. And then he said, what do you think is the biggest threat to UX being successful here? And I happen to know, because it came out in the conversation, that their project and product managers would get bonuses if they completed their project within certain budget constraints and within certain time constraints. Now, that sounds like a great idea, right? Of course you want your projects to come in on time and on budget. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that if those project managers or those product managers don't think UX is important, it'll be an easy line item for them to X out, because they weren't getting a bonus on how successful the product was or how well it met the needs of the company or the people. They were only getting a bonus if it was done in a certain time frame and on a certain budget. So the tendency is going to be to cut as much as they can, to do things as quickly as they can, because that's what they're getting extra money for. And in that case, what I have seen is that then they just kind of get rid of as much UX work as possible. So that's a possible obstacle. I always ask companies when they bring me in to grow UX, start UX or grow UX, I'll ask them, do you have bonuses, or not even bonuses, but just performance reviews? How are people rewarded here? That mid-level management level, that can be important if you want UX to grow.